All right, we're on live. This is What Does Victor Think About International News for 2016, January 7th. We have lots of rage-inducing news, even though we're only a week into the year. So what do you want to talk about first?
Well, let's start with the economic collapse in China.
Uh, well, people have been warning about this and ignoring the warnings about this for a couple of years now. So what makes it different now?
Well, what makes it different is the Chinese have started trying to use their new circuit breaker system. See, a few months ago, like 4 months ago, basically this was already starting to happen. However, the Chinese then took billions of their foreign currency reserves, dumped it into the market, and installed a new system where if this market drops by 7%, they immediately stop trading.
Ah, yes, the circuit breaker. But
Yes.
technically, actually, a lot of stock markets have circuit breakers in them. Even, I think most of the U.S. markets have circuit breakers now.
That's true. But as you have pointed out to me before, a lot of markets have things called short selling and basically being able to bet against something so you know when something is going terrible, as opposed to letting the bubble expand and expand and expand.
Well, technically, you can short sell stocks and other things in China. It's just the Chinese government is trying to make it illegal for Chinese people to do that.
Yeah, you pretty much can only short the Chinese stock market in stock markets outside the Chinese market.
Well, here's where I would like to plug the new movie, The Big Short, and the book, which it is based on, because it does a decent job of explaining how shorting and credit default swaps work and how important they are. Not just that they will cause the unstable situation to collapse, but also really you need it to collapse before it gets worse. And
Yes.
China is not allowing that to happen. So their real estate slash economic bubble just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Well, yes. No, I haven't seen the movie The Big Short yet, but no, the it talks about how credit default swaps and basically betting against the market or shorting is bad is complete and utter bullshit.
Well, there are ways it can be badly implemented. If you effectively are using the credit defaults to bet on other credit defaults, and effectively a giant sort of almost Ponzi scheme of roulette gambling, then it's a problem. But the fundamental idea of short selling is actually essential to the long term health of capitalist markets.
Well,
Because
yeah.
you really need somebody to tell you when your shit stinks and that you have to stop doing things, even if it's really painful, because it's only going to get more painful.
Yes, it's only going to get more painful. And if something isn't working, it doesn't matter how much positive feelings and propaganda you have going, it's eventually going to fail.
Yes, no, you can't prop things up through, well, government money printing and good feelings forever. Eventually, the fact that you have large numbers of buildings or entire cities which have no people in them, as both the US has discovered and, well, the US and the world and now China, you just can't do that and expect there to be no consequences.
Yes, and in China's case, they literally have entire cities without people living in them.
Actually, at the height of the U.S. bubble, while it wasn't literally entire cities, there were entire neighborhoods, which were effectively were, you know, entire suburbs, which
Yeah,
are
yeah,
effectively vacant.
pretty much, yeah. It was great. Uh, but no, it looks like maybe the Chinese bubble isn't going to be bursting this instant because China still has a few tools left. It can prop up its market, but it's becoming quite clear that It's inevitable.
Well, that's the thing. You can't, unless you're in the numbers and can see the numbers, you can't really see when this is going to happen. And China is very opaque with its economic numbers.
Well,
And it can happen very quickly.
Well, a bunch of people have realized that their 5 to 7% GDP growth number for this past year is complete and utter bullshit.
The Chinese growth numbers have always been a bit bullshit. I'm not saying they weren't growing and growing fast. They sure were. And they still have a lot of potential, but right now they are sabotaging themselves really badly.
Well, I think the Chinese government is gambling on sustained or low oil prices. There's gambling on that and the low resources and commodities market that has been created. Part of it is because their demand has gone down, but part of it is also an oversupply, and that people went too hard into several types of resource production, and now their industry can reap the benefits of much lower resource prices.
Well, in some ways, they are absolutely right about that. Resource prices are down and look to be down for the foreseeable future. The problem is that they've sort of, the popularity of their government is essential to them to stop any attempts at, having something in which the vast bulk of the people have a say in their government. And right now they have a massive pollution problem. They have a looming, they already have an economic problem and a looming even bigger one. And right now they are desperate to distract their citizens with patriotism, tough talk, and anything which will allow their government to keep going with popular favor of the people.
Oh yes, but the other thing that's also screwing them is people forget there's a limited amount of investment in capital in the world. This isn't infinite, right? And
the banks have sort of colluded with the governments to effectively make a money spinning machine, which allows them to multiply their money almost infinitely. Although it doesn't equate to actual real invested resources. There is definitely not an infinite amount of actual resources which can be invested into somebody's economy.
Well, yes, but also there isn't even an infinite amount of cash in the market. Yes, theoretically, ways things are rigged, the banks could just print an infinite amount of money.
Now, technically, the governments print the infinite amount of money. They just hand it over to the banks for low interest rates.
Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is that there's a limited amount of capital that's available for investment. And a lot of that is being pulled from markets. It's not just China, but around the world, into a bunch of the markets that are emerging and are China's competitors that look to be much more attractive investments. Go
ahead.
Right now, a lot of nations in the Pacific Rim are looking to benefit immensely from the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the opening of free trade, and they're also benefiting from the low resource prices. In fact, for investments there, you can theoretically get a much higher return for your investment, and those countries are benefiting that since the resource costs are lower and they have some trade agreements on the horizon, the price of entry into the market has finally become low enough that they can enter the market.
Well, yes. I mean, to some extent, many of them already have. Vietnam has even been exporting to the West to an increasing degree, but especially Indonesia has really stepped up the amount of exports it has to places like North America.
Oh, yeah.
But that's been happening for a while. It's squeezing China's low-end sector harder and harder, but they still have the advantage that they're, huge. And the fact is, if you can produce something which will sell in China, you can sell a lot of it, and China can produce a lot of whatever you are willing to pay them to produce. The problem is, yeah, they have an unresponsive economy and economic system, and their government is getting more and more desperate as the clouds of deadly smog descend upon their major cities. Victor? Oh dear, we appear to have lost Victor's voice, at least. I still see him in the call. Hello? All right. Well, that's all right. You are still in the call. I will put you on speakerphone. Oh, wait a second. Say hello, Victor.
Hi.
Well, try and boot your computer up, and in the meantime, you can talk through my microphone. Unfortunately, we will not be able to see your beautiful, beautiful, apparently teenage boy Japanese face.
Okay, look, that was basically the closest thing to a professional that Face Rig offers, okay? That is the closest it comes. It was either that or a Kaiser cat.
Well, if you want to advocate for the unity and expansion of the German people, then Kaiser Cat is your cat.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we were talking about the economic situation in China. And, well, let's go to the bottom line. How long do we think China can actually keep on shutting down and restarting its stock market before they actually have a really big crash? Or will there even be a really big crash?
Well, the honest answer is I don't know. Like, on the one hand, I get the impression a lot of foreign investors have been pulling out their money from China as fast as they can. Like George Soros pulled out his money from China, and as far as I know, Warren Buffett did as well. And a bunch of other foreign investors have been following suit. And the kind of dicing of the Chinese of pulling out their putting in their money into the market has in a way been that, well, is basically replacing the foreign currency that is exiting the money, well, exiting the market. So the amount that, so the chance the exposure to the rest of the world's investment houses and banks might actually be relatively low.
Yeah, but I think the thing is that when the rest of the world gets scared enough to start pulling its money out of China is when things are actually going to get bad. China is enough of a closed system that I think it's going to be able to sort of halfway bullshit its way through this for quite some time until the point where foreign investors are actually start actually yanking their money out, at which point the fear will become too strong. But with the lack of transparency in China's numbers, yeah, it's almost an impossible call to make.
Well, the problem is, in my opinion, right, it's probably an impossible call, but no, I get the impression that Western investors are pulling out. Like, again, there's a reason the market is going down, and the sad thing is, the Chinese investors Well, the ones in China that are probably pulling out their money, one risk that they are going to be executed for their non-patriotism, but might not have the same numbers that the Western investors have. I think the real problem, though, is that if the Chinese markets crash, that also goes down with China's credit markets. China is currently the ones that are supporting the this era of very low interest liquid cash we have going right now. And if China has to finally stop printing money and having such liquid credit markets, that's going to push up interest rates throughout the world.
Yeah. Well, China certainly helped prop that up, but actually, lately it's been mostly the central banks of Europe and North America which have been doing the manipulations.
Oh, that's true. In a normal debt market, I could say, a 1 or 2% uptick in the interest rates would not do a lot right now. Wouldn't do a lot. However, in the current markets we have it, where countries like Greece and, hell, in our case, the province of Ontario, are basically on the verge of bankruptcy based on 0.5% interest going up. That could be a problem.
Yeah, that could put Europe back into the crisis it thinks it has narrowly managed to avert. And
Europe into the crisis, certain Canadian provinces into the crisis zone, and certain American states also back into the crisis zone.
well, California sort of is in the crisis zone.
Yes, it is. It just isn't admitting it yet. It's been in the crisis zone for some time.
And I believe Puerto Rico is on its second default at this point and begging the Washington, D.C. to bail it out.
Yes. Actually, hold on. I'm going to just let my computer rest for a little while before I try this again. I'm going to call you on my landline just to save some minutes. I'll talk to you in a bit. Bye.
All right. Well, this is fun. But yes, while we are sitting... Oh, there's Victor. Hello. Any chance you could connect with your tablet or smartphone or something?
They're actually also busy running important work stuff at the moment. And it's January. I'm doing a lot of stuff, unfortunately. Really, I need to just get a better fan for my computer and just deal with the heating issue once and for all. Look, with the case closed, it overheats. With the case open, it overheats. With a giant fan pushed up beside it, it overheats. No matter what happens, it overheats.
All right. Well, you might want to check to see if at any point somebody overclocked or attempted to overclock the computer.
No, I haven't changed the settings from the last time you took a look at it, and it's still at the right settings.
All right. Well,
anyways, back to the topic at hand. But no, it's a question of how long China can keep going. We don't know. But the one thing is, if commodity prices at this point do go up, China's toast.
Well, there's a lot of things which could destabilize the situation. But there's also the question of, while China is worried about this and slowly descending into the crisis as opposed to dropping like a rock, how aggressive are they going to start being to distract people in things like the East China Sea and the various little islands that nobody really cares about, but nations feel that their honor is tied to in the Eastern Pacific?
Personally, I don't think they're going to really be that aggressive into those areas. I mean, they've made their attempts into trying to rally patriotism at the moment, but as far as I can see, it's not really making that much of a propaganda impact of that it normally would. What they probably are going to start doing for the impact is to start going through another round of various trials and finding people that they're going to call out as responsible for, say, the pollution and the market crash, and probably have them sentenced to death.
Well, yeah, that is definitely another way, and the whole internal corruption. And then you also have various people on the Republican Party who are saying that the next time China tries to hack us, that we should reveal all the dirty secrets we know about the Chinese government to the Chinese people.
Pretty much, yeah. Now, I think between those things and the tenuous international situation, and also in the situation that China's market does crash, they're going to need a bunch of the goodwill of the international community. I think they're going to go more into an internal terror regime of executing the people they don't like.
Well, it is the final resort to basically ensure a lack of rebellion, is to effectively terrorize the people who could possibly think about rebelling. And it usually works.
And also, the Chinese tend to be pretty fickle on their foreign affairs. And the fact is, if their market does crash, the opposite would probably happen, and that's what I'd more bet on. They'd be more willing to do things for things like the South China Sea and and letting go of North Korea. Of course, all of these things are going to have massive price tags attached to it.
Well, yes, they still have some cards to play, but frankly, a Chinese collapse is largely going to be an internal Chinese collapse. Even if the rest of the world wanted to do something about it, there's not a lot they actually could do.
It depends, right? I just would say that from the Chinese diplomatic and foreign strategic, I know I just said a bunch of gobbledygook there, but still, from their strategy, I think that's more of what they're going to be going for now. The executions and an internal terror are tends to get them better results, and they themselves, though, the certain cards like the South China Sea aren't going to be useful for too long, and they might as well get whatever they can out of it now. In real terms to help them. And also North Korea is basically run its course for how useful it can be to them. They could just decide to cut some kind of deal over it. And that deal is probably going to involve money.
Possibly. I'm not entirely sure how that would work out. But speaking of North Korea, they have just apparently tested a hydrogen bomb.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's a definite maybe.
I don't even think the nuclear program important anymore, other than they might get.
You're actually beginning to break up a bit here.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, I can hear you. I just said you're breaking up a bit.
Oh, okay. It's not really that important. They have a crappy nuclear weapon. In real terms, the more threatening thing is their million-man army of crap, and all of the artillery pieces they're pointing at South Korea. It's quite clear that the sanctions are not going to collapse the North Korean regime. Arguably, the sanctions are helping the North Korean regime stay in power.
I don't think anything to do with the sanctions will either stop or start the North Korean regime from being in power.
Yeah.
About the only thing the sanctions do is stop them from being able to do things that they want to do.
Yes. They're just puffing their chest again and seeing what they could probably get out of the international community and the Obama administration before the next president takes over.
Well, yes, it's almost certainly for another round of international blackmail or attempted blackmail against all their neighbors.
Yes.
Hopefully, in this respect, the other countries will ignore them as much as is actually possible.
I don't think the other countries have a choice that much in ignoring them because there's so many other problems currently happening in the world that demand attention.
Yes, well, let's get on to some of those other problems.
How about fuck the Saudis?
Well, yes, speaking of resource prices and resource prices staying low, we will get to the Saudi Arabia and the Middle East and the wonders of the current Sunni-Shia Cold War.
Yeah. So, Saudi Arabia decided it was a good idea, and through a calculated Machiavellian sort of way it was, to execute the effective archbishop, cleric of the Shia religion in their area, along with a whole bunch of Shia leaders that were totally members of Al-Qaeda.
Well, now, some of the people they executed were actually tied to extremist groups. This particular cleric was relatively well thought of, and at least publicly had only advocated peaceful means.
Yes, there were a few actual Al-Qaeda people in the group that was executed. They were not all Al-Qaeda.
Well, no, they just claimed all of them had ties to terrorists. And apparently having ties to Iran is, well, or terrorism.
Well, yes. And then they were publicly executed on New Year's Day via the Saudi method of executing people.
Well, the Saudis got exactly what they wanted out of it. The Iranians and several other Shia groups then had huge protests. The Saudi embassies were attacked inside Iran, and they got to shut them down and pull all their diplomats out. And they now have their giant Sunni alliance of countries with which they intend to fight terrorism.
Yes, and that terrorism seems to be anyone that happens to be Shia.
Well, at least anyone who publicly speaks out about being Shia.
Yeah. I believe there's a word for that in the English dictionary. I believe it's called genocide.
Religions are not a race. It's an ideology.
Alright, fine. What do you call it when you wipe out someone of another ideology?
War.
Right.
That's generally what people fight over.
Fine. Tomatoes. Either way, this is bullshit.
No, it appears to be very effective strategy for uniting the Sunnis behind you, isolating the Shias from the rest of the Islamic world by forcing the countries to take sides, and then getting the rest of the world to sort of agree that you're not entirely to blame for this, because it's your embassies which are and people who are being attacked.
That is still so bullshit.
No, the bullshit part is that a lot of countries seem to be falling for it, at least in public.
Yeah.
No, the Saudis are upping the heat in the Cold War between the Sunnis and Shiites, and they've managed to do it in a way which will not alienate their American allies. It'll annoy them. They'll think this whole execution thing was, a bad step. It has ratcheted up tensions, but then they'll see the Iranian and Shia response and think that's over the top as well. And both of them are a problem, but one of them is our ally and one of them isn't.
And one of them is invading Yemen and the other one isn't.
Well, yes, it also allowed them to re-kick off their campaign to hit Yemen. In fact, I think this is probably time not so much for the new year as time for when they were ready to continue the campaign in Yemen. Along with the suppression of the Shias in pretty much the rest of the Arabian Peninsula. No, actually, I think, although in the long run, this will likely to get them into a lot of trouble and quite possibly be counterproductive to the Saud family's legitimacy and longevity. In the short run, this seems to have been a relatively well thought out diplomatic maneuver.
Oh yes, in the short run, this was a smart move. The problem is this is a smart move in a conflict we shouldn't even want to have.
Well, this is sort of the essence of who they are. They are the leading nation of the Sunni Muslims, especially the Sunni Arabs, and effectively they and Iran have been locked into this sort of influence Cold War for decades. And this is a rather successful maneuver in that Cold War. Do I think the Cold War is a good idea at all? That they should resolve their religious differences in some other way? Yes, but so far this has been a very long time of them not resolving these differences in a wholly diplomatic way.
Yes. However, at this point, there's a situation where NATO forces are in the area, a large Russian army is in the area, there's a bunch of extremist groups running around the whole place. Both sides are quietly preparing nuclear and other weapons of mass destruction.
Well, yes, I mean, that's the thing. This whole maneuver that the Saudis are pulling is very likely to cause the Iranians, if they ever were going to honor the nuclear agreement with the West, they're probably not going to honor it now. And it's going to be because of this.
Yeah, because of this, effectively, Vladimir Putin has ensured that both Saudi Arabia and Iran will, in their own ways, have access to nuclear weapons.
Yes, no, it's quite amusing how Russia has been playing all sides on this. Yes, giving nuclear technology to the Saudis while it militarily supports the Iranians.
Yeah.
I'm presuming they're getting a giant payoff for that.
I'm presuming so as well. And I also assume that Putin and his cronies are having a little bit of a social experiment to see what would have happened if World War III between the United States and Russia actually had occurred.
I don't think it's going to be quite like that. There are no large nuclear arsenals here. The nearest large nuclear arsenals that could possibly get involved are the ones with the Pakistanis, and if they get involved, India will get involved.
Oh, you mean with the other problem that's probably going to also ratchet up with India right now?
Oh, what problem is India having other than the usual?
Nothing in particular, except that Modi also has been somewhat ratcheting up tensions with Pakistan. And there's a good chance that if problems start arising, India might decide to try and take advantage of it.
Well, yes, that's very possible, but that's the main reason I think that Pakistan will largely try and stay out of this particular fight. They actually have relatively good relations with the Iranians, even though they are majority Sunni and have a sizable Shiite minority.
Yes.
So I think they'd rather stay out of this particular fight, although I'm sure the Saudis will want to try and force as many countries as possible to take sides in this, seeing as how the Sunni population is so much larger than the Shia population.
Well, he's going to try, the Saudis are trying to push that. The Turks have their own agenda at the moment, and that agenda is Erdogan's ego.
Well, they've also joined the giant Saudi alliance.
Yes, they have. Hell, in some ways, unofficially, Israel is a part of the giant Saudi alliance.
Israel is its own side, sort of like the Kurds.
Yes, just that side is currently favoring the Saudi side. And you'll notice there isn't very much news currently on the Israeli actions and also the Palestinian stabbing attacks.
Well, you also have to be careful there because Netanyahu's been playing a relatively, well, he's rather brusque and outspoken in public. Behind the scenes, he's been cutting deals with Putin and other people to allow him to do what he wants to do, with Israel taking no real position on who should win in Syria.
Yep.
I mean, the Israelis have effectively told the Russians they're not going to interfere with Assad either for or against him.
Pretty much, yeah. Great.
And in return, the Russians look likely to ignore any Israeli actions which happen against Hezbollah.
Yep. But then that goes into another thing. The stabbing attacks of Palestinians and the number of stabbing attacks occurring in the world have shown that you really can kill and wound a whole bunch of people without guns.
Well, not that many. I mean, most of the stabbing attacks in Israel, well, Israel is a security state, so they usually only get to stab a few people before they get shot. So each individual attack doesn't kill that many.
Yes. That many.
Mind you, there have been stabbings in other places which have killed a lot more.
A lot of people, yeah.
And also, quite frankly, even in states which aren't the United States, if you really, really want to get yourself a gun, there's almost nowhere in the world where you can't get one.
Oh, yeah. No, there's tons of gun control in Russia, for example, but a lot of Russians have guns. Good guns.
Well, guns which keep operating and have large clips.
Yes.
But yes, that brings us on to the wonderful, well, apparently the Democratic strategy to win the 2016 election cycle.
And again, this is so bullshit. Like, in a way, I agree with certain kinds of gun control. I do. I don't say I agree with that pistols should be banned and stuff, but the entire way they've approached this and what they're trying to do legally is complete bullshit.
Well, that's the other thing, and the fact is that gun deaths, not counting suicides, have actually been going down dramatically in the U.S. And so far, the studies are utterly inconclusive on whether states which have high levels of gun control actually has resulted in fewer gun deaths.
Well, not only that, but in the incident that has apparently sparked this off in California, first of all, they don't want to call the perpetrators Muslim extremists.
Well, some people want to.
Yes, some people. Second of all, there seems to be a lack of mention that these guys were also building a ton of bombs, and in the land where they didn't have access to guns, they would have just detonated the bombs.
Well, bombs are a little difficult to actually, unless you know what you're doing and can experiment a bit, they're a little difficult to get so they actually work effectively and go off when you expect them to.
Yeah, it's a little difficult, but it's not that hard.
No, if you are a dedicated nut, then you can definitely do it. Mind you, from what I've seen from the writings of these people, although they were definitely influenced and used it as their the reason was Islam or their particular belief in Islam. These were basically classic disgruntled employees.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't even go after, priority targets. They went after the people who had pissed them off personally.
Oh, yeah.
Frankly, I think there's a good chance, although they are, I suppose, Islamic terrorists, that quite frankly, these people would have been terrorists even if they weren't Muslims.
Probably. But anyway, still, there's the point that they were making bombs. They were going to detonate these bombs. And then we have this odd wave of lock and step attempts to push gun control, no matter what, as the most important issue, even with all of this international stuff happening, from the sudden bullshit front page editorial of the New York Times to the Daily Show to everyone trying to push it and censor out any information that would say that this isn't a good idea. Yeah, especially since, well, what President Obama is doing is, with his executive actions, is exactly what the Democrats were criticizing George W. Bush for doing, and is pretty freaking illegal.
Well, that's the big problem. Effectively, he's basing it off things like the no-fly list, which is already under a court challenge and is likely to be overturned on constitutional grounds, since effectively you can put anyone you want on this list without any real judicial overview and without letting them know they're on the list or how they got on it or how they can get off it. So the list is sort of totalitarian bullshit, just put in a nice wrapper in a democratic country, and then they're going to try and base their gun control over something which is almost certainly going to be squashed by the courts.
Yeah.
But then again, I don't really think they expect this to pass. I think they expect to push the Republicans into taking a pro-gun position, and their pollsters have told them that this is going to help them out to drive up their base and increase their chances in the election. And I think most of these measures were just waiting for the next big gun crime to occur, and then they all went into action.
Yeah, no, that's what it looks like. Just, I don't know, I'm taking a look at the numbers myself, right? And the numbers really aren't there to at least make a democratic victory out of this or to warrant the amount of effort they're putting into it. Like, right now the electoral numbers are basically showing that, well, basically in a head-on election between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, Trump would actually win, and the Democrats will lose the control of the House and the Senate.
Well, the Democrats have already lost control of the House and the Senate.
Okay, they will give the Republicans a supermajority. Like the only thing I could think of, like none of the states that have basically lax gun measures are going to vote for this, and the states that have gun control, a few of them don't look like it's going to be that popular. I mean, the only place is where this idea, at least what I've seen in the poll numbers, they might have been updated since I've last checked them, but still, it seems to be really only truly popular in states like New York and basically the East Coast maritime provinces, not provinces, states. That's where it seems to be truly popular, and I'm not sure how much popular it's going to be because of how scared everyone is getting.
Well, yes, as I say, this was probably put in place before they knew the next gun incident would be a sort of terrorist incident. Well, Islamic-ish terrorist incident. But I don't think that's what they're aiming at. Nobody's going to be voting on this. This is just a way to establish a Democratic position and then get the Republicans to take a more extreme pro-gun position. This is a PR battle. It's not an actual political battle. I don't think any of the Democrats think they're actually going to pass or implement anything. They're just going to force the Republicans to say things and then increase their base and make people pissed off at the Republicans with a massive PR shift. The New York Times has come out. Most of the left-leaning news stations, papers, whatever is left of them, have all come out and backing this. And basically the comedy shows, which are left-leaning, have come out and backing this. No, it's about a big PR campaign where the majority of the American people are in favor of some kind of gun control and don't necessarily know that the kind of gun control that the Democrats are currently talking about is unconstitutional and based on something that could be implemented in a totalitarian state and will never actually go anywhere. But more importantly, it shows the Democrats care about this issue and the Republicans don't.
Yeah, except they're running into problems. Like things like, oh, I don't know, Cologne.
Well, that's the problem. The fact is, fear is beginning to hit the Western world as various incidents occur, and this is undermining their push. But really, in some ways, the PR push, although I'm not sure they picked the right thing to do their big full PR push, that the fact is they are getting their push. But yes, let's go on to Cologne.
Yes, yes, you're right. In a PR push, the idea of a PR push, that's a good political strategy. They're choosing the wrong issue, and they're not seeing the reality of the world. Like, yes, Cologne. So at least the BBC is reporting on it now, so at least there's a viewpoint and stuff you can get that isn't in far right-wing, near-Nazi, Polish or German information about it.
Now, it's not Nazi. I mean, it's sort of vaguely racist right-wing groups who are screaming about it. But the fact is, they have reasons to scream about this. Not even so much the attacks themselves, but the fact it took us about 5 days to hear about the attacks.
No, they have reasons to scream about it. Meaning that the way people heard about it was through those channels. Hell, the way I found out about it was through the Polish news. No, like a bunch of the German press didn't report on it, the initial police reports greatly minimized what had happened. It wasn't until basically the YouTube videos showing gangs shooting fireworks into the crowds that people started going, what the fuck happened here?
Well, the problem is that all right-thinking Western Europeans have been conditioned that people of darker skin are victims. We need to help them out and possibly be slightly racist in their in avoiding them and our expectations that they aren't going to be able to compete effectively. But that speaking out publicly against them is racist, horrible, and awful. And it looks like the press has taken this so far that when a large number of apparently coordinated people of North African or Middle East descent decide to round up a bunch of local women, sexually harass them, assault them, and take their stuff, they don't want to report on it because that would make them look bad.
Yes, we should report on the literal raping and pillage of Cologne. And there's just all the clothes that came out of it. Like the mayor saying that effectively all Muslims are rapists, or I should say foreigners are potential rapists, so you should stay away from them, and then you won't get raped. Which,
yes, combines a rather large amount of racism with a rather large amount of victim blaming.
Oh yeah. No, it's amazing.
And this guy is from the German left.
No, it's from the German left, but yes. Oh no, just even. No, it's just freaking ridiculous. The CCTV footage not being released yet, and apparently there's still been no arrests in this incident. In fact, the police had initially reported that a few people were arrested, but now it's being revealed that no one has been arrested.
Well, apparently where most of the attacks took place, which I believe was the downtown station, the police were outside the station, but apparently there were no police inside the station, and none of the police felt they needed to go inside the station.
Well, that depends. A bunch of the police officers have been speaking out, but apparently they were just under strict orders not to interfere.
Well, I haven't seen that, but then mostly I've been watching the BBC coverage.
Well, that's the thing. It's hard to know exactly what happened because, yes, that could just be right-wing propaganda, but it sounds somewhat right. I mean, the BBC is now revealing some statements by the police saying that things had got under control and they didn't know how or how they could control it. They were overwhelmed, but that contradicts the previous police chief's statement on what had happened.
Well, this is the problem. Effectively, when the mainstream press is refusing to effectively cover an issue, you're left listening to the opinions of the more extreme press, which you cannot entirely trust. At that point, you have no one left to trust for what actually happened.
Yeah.
Now, I think the center and center trending left press has really done itself a massive disservice here. I mean, they've effectively, once again, damaged their own credibility, made it more and more likely that people are just going to branch off and listen to their favorite internet journalist / demagogue, and only listen to the people who agree with them because there's nobody sort of in the center of issues you can actually listen to who's actually covering things.
Partly motivating us doing this broadcast, but also pissing the fuck out of me. Like in these issues, we just listed here, the center-left press has basically become what Fox News was.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, Fox News is the one channel which, although it's had some problems, has carved itself a niche where it is succeeding in this new internet era.
Yes, and they have followed suit in the worst ways of editing information and like obfuscating what it was meant by those Shia clerics being executed by Saudi Arabia. Not wanting to explain certain other details about the stock market crisis in China that is well known to anyone that's following it, as well as Cologne, even the BBC constantly restating we should not jump to conclusions and blame the migrants, we should not jump to conclusions and blame the migrants, constantly emphasizing these were men, but trying to obfuscate that it was mostly African people of North African and Middle East descent. And also that this seems to have been coordinated. It probably even was a terrorist psyop.
Well, yes, a rather bizarre and unsettling terrorist psyop. But I can sort of understand the China and Saudi Arabian situation. The fact is, most journalists who haven't been paying attention to it aren't going to realize that the killing of this particular cleric is a giant fuck you to the entire Shia community.
Anyone that follows Middle East politics, or I should say actually has studied it in any degree, who should be on their staff as a foreign correspondent and should be the expert contact they should have been talking to when this happened, should have told them that.
Yes, but apparently they don't want to pay the money for having somebody they can contact to tell them that.
Yeah. Just as anyone watching the stock markets in China that has a degree of intelligence that is currently shorting the fuck out of it, like George Soros.
Actually, at this point, I think George Soros has yanked all his money out. He was yanking his money out a couple years ago.
Yes, he was, and he's been shorting it, and he's been making a massive quantity of money. Again. Not only that, but just how, even with this gun control push, for fuck's sake, they are basically helping the Democrat Party. Well, I agree that public relations or a PR stunt like this is a good tactic. The press should be pointing out that this is, in fact, illegal, or at least talking to legal experts and calling them out on this because this is bullshit.
Well, yeah. I mean, the Cologne thing is a little different, actually, I have to say. While the China thing and the Saudi thing can be somewhat taken by ignorance, and the fact that certain people and experts are going to tell them different things about it, the Cologne thing is just an outright case of we don't want to cover this because it makes us look bad to say these things.
Yeah.
Because this is something which has, I mean, they're talking about how they have to install new CCTV cameras with extra long lenses, but this was in the big station downtown. This was a widespread act by 1,000 people interfering with thousands of other people. This is not something which, we don't really have any way to cover this kind of situation. This is right in the heart of Western Europe.
Well, it's quite obvious they tried to initially cover this up. They didn't actually want the information and word to get out of this. And they forgot that we're living in the internet age with video cameras. But that's the thing, right? The press has become Fox News. The center-left press has basically become, we're not going to report something that disagrees with our narrative or will make our politicians look bad. Even when if they thought about it, would it have made them look that bad compared to what they're looking like now? Like with Cologne, had they just reported on it, it seems to be coming clear, although it's not for sure yet, that this might actually have been some extremist psychop, that certain extremists purposely did organize this to happen in Cologne.
Yeah, but in some ways that's even worse, because effectively that indicates that 1,000 of these refugees, or these refugees combined with people who were already in the country, are effectively terrorist operatives.
Yes, but at the same time, at least to keep the trust of the people in line, and to keep the trust of the people, and are disseminating effective information, and a plan can be drawn to deal with this. Like people that were following, when you open up your borders and don't check anyone that's coming in, this stuff is probably going to end up happening. However, now people are realizing that, probably thousands of terrorist operators have actually infiltrated the country. Not to mention, and the right-wing press is basically going with the line that all the migrants are probably horrific rapists.
Well, I have to disagree with you there. The fact is, I think the majority of this 1,000 men or so probably aren't terrorist operatives at all. They just are disaffected migrants and immigrants who have been living in Germany for a while. And for a while now, in certain parts of Germany, like in certain parts of the UK and certain parts of Sweden, they've been effectively, the police have been ignoring whatever they've been doing because the police doesn't want to be seen as racist and beating up, in quotes, black people. And they've been allowed to get away with pretty much anything. And then they have people in their community who rile them up and basically tell them how they're discriminated against and oppressed, which is sometimes true. And then they have, because they've been effectively left in a lawless environment, gone out and done lawless things. They've gotten away with it. And it's just escalated, because the fact is, there's always going to be a certain segment of any community which, if there's no police enforcement of their activities, they're going to get out of control. And it looks like these people in certain areas have effectively been left without any police supervision whatsoever. And this would happen with any group of people. If you just leave a group of people and there's no police and there's no consequences for criminal acts, then there's going to be a lot more crime. People are going to see crime going around them. Those of them who are more aggressively minded are going to say, look, if these people can get away with it and are getting away with it, and I can get away with it. And then you get problems like this. And quite frankly, looks like it's a symptom of something which has been going on for a while now. These aren't, ISIS followers. They might be ISIS sympathizers, or at least sympathizers with a more radical version of Islam as their cultural identity, but they're doing this because they can get away with it and have been getting away with it. I suspect they've probably been harassing, stealing, and raping for a while now, and it's just that the police haven't been willing to get involved. And now they've done it on a large enough scale that, well, it got out.
That's probably right, but the biggest problem is we don't know which one of us is right, because the press isn't really wanting to report on this, and the government isn't really wanting to do anything about it, although they're trying to do something now, belatedly.
Yes, they're trying to do something now. But that was the thing. The police have been avoiding these situations. The press has been avoiding these situations. And the government has been avoiding these situations. Effectively, every branch, every estate, including the Fifth Estate, has been letting this problem slide. and we don't know how big it is, how deep it is, or how bad it is. Although, as I say, I suspect if you go and talk to a bunch of lower class, poor Germans and immigrants, this is probably a problem which is just only now breaking into public knowledge.
Yes, and right now, if things keep going the way they are going, UKIP will end up ruling Britain. There will be conservative tweets, including Maria Le Pen becoming the ruler of France, and Europe will go hard right, and the United States will elect Donald Trump.
Well, that's the thing. If I'm right, and I really hope I'm not that right, in fact, I sort of hope I'm wrong about most of this, but if I'm right, all this stuff is going to start coming out. People are going to start reporting the rapes which have already occurred, reporting the assaults which have already occurred, and not just in Cologne.
Oh, that's the thing. There's been apparently now information coming out that 2 other towns in Germany experienced similar incidents, although the full details hasn't been really revealed yet.
Well, I know there was some reports about Hamburg, but apparently it was a much smaller incident. But then again, I can't really trust the German press or anybody else's press really to report effectively how large an incident it was.
Yes, which is the main problem at the moment.
But yeah, this is going to be a massive boon because effectively, since the center and the left seem to have abandoned the truth, you're going to have a bunch of right-wingers, some of them more or less benign, and some of them, well, fascists, who are going to march into the center of political thought because it's been left open for them. And it's, I mean, at this point, there's a good chance UKIP is going to do really well in the UK. The UK may leave the EU.
And all of the center-left dreams that they have been trying to push forward will be in complete ash.
Well, all their greater dreams. The fact is, most of the dreams that they've had about things have sort of come to pass. Gay rights in the West is almost universal. It's now at this point, if you say anything negative about somebody who is considered lower on you on the the social stack or the oppression stack, you get pilloried in the press and probably lose your job. I mean, they've had a massive victory. The problem is they've pushed it so far that they've lost their grip on reality.
Yes, they have. But anyways, we've been talking a lot, and I sort of have a business engagement that I have to go to ASAP, so I think this is a good spot to end the discussion, and hopefully my computer will be properly working for the next one we do.
That would be good. All right, we will talk again later.
All right, talk to you later. Bye.
Goodbye, everyone, and thanks for watching.
Yes, goodbye.